So Measure Up is a new way to look at the social value of your activities. Of course, there's a lot of kind of frameworks and methodologies kind of out there already, but what we found is that people were finding that there was a lot of kind of barriers to using those. There's a lot that you need to pay for. A lot of it's proprietary. The terms can be changed underneath your feet. And we just thought it's really wrong that organizations, especially smaller social enterprises, VCSE groups that are working tirelessly to try and do the right thing at a grassroots level in our community, having to pay this kind of tax to socially value their activities so that they are able to benefit from things like procurement under the Social Value Act, when actually they're already investing so much in doing the thing. So it just seemed really kind of counterproductive to us. So it seems obvious to us that what's needed is a kind of free, open, accessible tool, which anybody can go to. So that's Measure Up. It's just a website. You go there. You don't need to put your email address in it. You don't need to pay a dime. We're not pretending that it's some kind of government department or quango. We're clear we're an independent kind of partnership of 3 organizations that are just passionate about this. So that's Impact Reporting, my organization, State of Life, and PRD. And we've released effectively a load of research that we've done or funded based on a lot of kind of openly available kind of government data and the standards in the Treasury Green Book, which one of our partners helped to influence. That's Will Watt at State of Life. And we've just made it all free and open and transparent. We've also done, I think, 2 things beyond just making it free and open and transparent that are quite new as well. One is provided a really clear pathway for people to improve their practice. So if they want to go beyond just applying a simple kind of proxy value, a multiplier to what they're doing, say how much is an apprentice worth or whatever, we show them a clear pathway of bronze, silver and gold standards of kind of measurement that can help them to get a better purchase on what that value is to have greater accuracy. And that could range from just applying the multiplier to applying the multiplier with a few factors, like maybe it's different between men and women or young people and older people or in different parts of the country. And we sort of explain to them how they can kind of apply that. That's the silver level. The gold level is here's how you can use validated questions to undertake a survey and actually directly ask stakeholders what the impact of that initiative is on them. Because the best way to understand what's going on, of course, is to measure it directly rather than do all of this kind of economics magic, which we love. But if you can just ask somebody what's the impact, then that's always better. I'd say perhaps the last thing that we're doing as well is we're really trying to focus on the things that matter to well-being. And, what we're finding is that those other valuation frameworks really railroad people down towards what gives the biggest number and what is available on this list. So they drastically undervalue, particularly the VCSE sector, by just valuing all voluntary activity at I think it's the median wage, so around 14, 15 quid an hour is all that, any charity activity is valued at. And they place a huge emphasis on apprenticeships, which is great. Apprenticeships are important. They really matter. They really make a big difference. But actually, there's a lot of amazing stuff that VCSE groups across the country are doing that really deserve support, that are really speaking to some of the big issues that we have in our communities and that local authorities are really experiencing. So we have kind of market failure in social value right now, I think, where the resources are not going to the right places because of some of these intermediary factors like measurement frameworks. And Measure Up is our intent not to kind of replace what's out there, not to try and kind of say this is the way, but actually what we would really love is some kind of support, particularly from government, in helping Measure Up be available as an alternative. So right now, it's pretty much just nailed on that if you do any kind of public sector procurement that has a social value component, you're going to need to use one particular framework, which is a proprietary framework, which has a certain set of values in it. And actually what we would love it is if it wasn't a monopoly anymore. And if, a local authority, for example, had to accept an equivalent, valuation provided again under Treasury Green Book standards. So it's kind of cross-compatible, would be acceptable as part of that procurement process if somebody wished to provide it. And it wouldn't be they wouldn't be disadvantaged in the process for using that, because that could unlock not just the values from Measure Up, but values from anybody, their own values, in fact, of the stuff that they're doing. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do in our little corner of the world.
Awesome. And in terms of traction that you might have had with local authorities in particular, is that something that you have sought to take to them, and what kind of response have you got?
Yeah, the response has been epic. We had a launch webinar about Measure Up and over 500 people tuned in. Many of them were local authorities, and they shared some of their frustrations with the current system. And, quite rightly, they said, hey, Matt, we're not doing it this way because we want it to be bad. There's a lot of kind of factors and resource constraints on us, and we're kind of just trying to react to that. Some of them were really kind enough to actually participate with us, and we formed a local authority working group of 6 or 7 local authorities that are actually working with us to help us deeply understand those issues and helping us to pilot some of this. There are numerous barriers legislatively and just kind of pragmatically, they know is not kind of ideal. So that's what we're seeking to really try and understand and kind of work with them on.
When you say legislative barriers, what kind of legislative barriers are you talking about, and how might they change with the upcoming devolution proposals?
Yeah, I think devolution could play a really positive role. And also there's been positive changes to call it out with PN 002, the new kind of social value guideline. I think is a big improvement on the last, and should create some pressure to value some different things. But it really is centered around the Social Value Act, and perhaps the lack of specificity on it in terms of how this sort of stuff is measured has kind of led to a situation where there's a bit of a lack of plurality, and we've just through no ill intent by anybody, we've ended up in a situation where there's pretty much one menu of values. And unless you're doing those things and doing the ones that have the highest number, you're probably not going to be drawn into a procurement process or benefit from any of that money from, say, a prime contractor, perhaps using your VCSE to deliver a project in a particular community and support your core work. That's just not going to happen, because there's only a small number of things on that list that have a significant enough value to move the needle in a procurement process. So, I think it would just be greater nuance, or perhaps some supplementary guidance, to avoid perhaps a big parliamentary process around the Social Value Act and how things should be measured, which could really help unblock a lot of amazing things happening at a grassroots level in our community that charities want to do. They're there to do, they're ready to do it, but there's just this little quirk in the kind of market that's preventing the money from flowing to them to do it.
And I think we've touched on the way that Measure Up is set up, really trying to qualify things with people, so that embracing that kind of qualitative dimension, which is often not there for reasons that you've talked about.
I think that's one component of it, and certainly that's not something we yet do enough about at Measure Up. We only launched it sort of 6 months ago, and qualitative information is very much kind of on our mind. We have guidance in there about kind of capturing qualitative information and sort of the importance of storytelling as part of this, but I think more needs to be done to improve the kind of validity of that. It's understandable that if local authorities are undertaking procurement processes which may be subject to litigation, if a bidder feels that they've been done wrong in that kind of process, that they need some form of kind of objective measure, a way to compare two bids to each other and be able to say, ideally beyond themselves and their own just sort of judgment, in order to kind of control that risk of litigation, this one is clearly better than this one. I think the problem is that the process as it stands has caused that to be, this one is a bigger number than this one, and not this one is better for our community and our local area than this one. There's no ability or confidence to do that bit. So I think that comes down to two things. One is a bit more of an embrace of quality information, because some of that will be necessary to tell the story of why this is important in a particular community or meets particular local needs. But also it's just about opening up the options so that other numbers are kind of effectively valid and worthwhile, so that if that VCSE group, for example, or social enterprise can appraise the value of their activity through a different framework or through their own work that they've done to understand their own impact, perhaps through surveying or through their own analysis, that can be valid in those processes, because currently it isn't.